I'm Joe Alton, MD, also known as Dr. Bones of doomandbloom.net, where you'll find over 700 post videos and podcasts on medical preparedness for any disaster. Together with my wife, Amy Alton, a nurse practitioner, we're the New York Times and Amazon best-selling authors of the Survival Medicine Handbook and other books, plus the designers of the awesome board game Doom and Bloom Survival, recently named by the Prepared Family blog as a teaching preparedness resource of the week. In these uncertain times, it's hard to read the news without seeing reports of the latest shooting by terrorists and the unhinged. Few believe that they could ever wind up in the crosshairs of a gunman's sight, but it can happen anytime, anywhere. What would be your response? The natural response for most people is not to do anything. You've heard me talk about normalcy bias before. Now, that's a tendency for people to believe everything follows a pattern and that every day will proceed normally because it always does. They're usually right. But when a terrorist breaks that pattern, the unprepared brain takes time to process the new situation. People will think that the sound of gunfire is fireworks or anything less threatening than an assassin out to kill them. Another thing most people think is that law enforcement or Homeland Security is coming to rescue them. Now, while these agencies do the best they can to counter situations like this, most mass shooting events end in just a few minutes. There's little or no chance that help will be there when you need it. Without a plan of action, the average person follows the herd. If 50 people around you drop to the floor, your natural tendency is to do the same. And cowering in fear under a table in plain view of a shooter is not a recipe for a good outcome. By having a plan, you're going to have a better chance of getting out of there in one piece. Now, let's suppose you're at the mall. What would your plan be if you heard gunfire nearby? What would you do first? Run? Okay, where? If you couldn't run, what would you do? These are things that you should be thinking about calmly and rationally whenever you're in an area where there are a lot of people. It may seem extreme to have to think of these things, but that's what I call the new normal. With an active shooter, what you do in the first few seconds may save your life. Give yourself a head start by always knowing what's happening around you. We call this situational awareness. Know where the exits are. Know who around you appears nervous or suspicious. Know what direction the gunfire is coming from. Sounds simple, doesn't it? But in this era of people immersed in their smartphones, few are situationally aware. And these are the easy targets an assassin is looking for. Hoodies and earbuds aren't going to be much good to help you see and hear when trouble's coming. Now, if you find yourself in the middle of a terrorist event, you should remember these three words: run, hide, fight. Just as stop, drop, roll can save the life of someone on fire, run, hide, fight might save the life of someone under fire. Run, hide, fight is the order of the actions that you should be taking in an active shooter scenario. Most people will hide as their first course of action. You, however, should run away from the direction of gunfire as soon as you hear it, leaving through those exits that you've been mentally marking. This will make it less likely that you and the shooter will cross paths. Forget about collecting your stuff. It's only going to slow you down. And face it, it's just stuff. If you're in the line of sight of the shooter, run away at an angle or zigzag, make yourself a more difficult target. I know it's not a natural action you'd think of doing, but most shooters aren't marksmen. They will miss a moving target. Now, a good citizen would yell for others to follow and prevent others from entering the kill zone. Don't spend precious time convincing a reluctant person to leave with you, though, or try to move or otherwise help the wounded, despite your natural tendency to want to do so. You have to get out of there. Becoming the next casualty doesn't do anyone any good. Even the police will leave the injured until after the shooter has been neutralized. By the way, if you see law enforcement, don't run up and hug them. Get your hands in the air, fingers spread where officers can see them. They need to know you're not the threat. Follow any instructions given and leave in the directions the officers came from. If there's only one exit and the shooter is standing in front of it, running might not be an option. Your next choice is hiding. You first want to get out of the shooter's line of sight. We call this concealment, but it isn't necessarily cover. If you're concealed, you can't be seen, but a bullet might penetrate to hit you. If you have found cover, it means that you're both hidden and protected from projectiles hurled your way. A leafy bush is good concealment, but a thick tree trunk is better cover. Now, in a building, hiding under a table in the same room as the shooter is a death sentence. Get into another room, preferably one with a door you can lock. If there's no lock, put together a barrier with heavy desks and chairs. Turn off the lights, silence your cell phone, and stay quiet behind an additional barrier like a table or in a closet. Now, if you can quietly alert authorities, do so. But don't respond to voice commands unless you're sure the danger is over. Sometimes the gunman will try to lure you out of a safe place by yelling, "All clear." By doing everything I just said, you've just made yourself a harder target to acquire for the shooter. And he wants to do his damage as fast as possible. He'll likely pass you by to find easier targets. What if you can't run and there's no reasonable hiding place? Well, you just might have to fight yourself out of there. This strategy isn't always doomed to failure. You still might be able to subdue an attacker even if unarmed. 3 unarmed men were able to do it to a shooter on a train in Paris. It's a last resort, but it can end without a fatality as it did there. If you don't fight, the shooter gets a clear shot to your head and death is likely. If you fight, it might just be harder to be hit with a fatal shot. Of course, it would be great if you were a martial arts expert, but any type of aggression against a gunman would disrupt their flow and possibly give you an advantage. If you can, approach him from the side or rear. Go for his weapon to control where it's pointed. If you have help, everyone should attack at the same time from different directions with whatever might be useful as a weapon while hurling objects that the shooter has to dodge. This guy is probably not James Bond. He'll be disconcerted and not be able to handle multiple threats at once. If you've disrupted the shooter or better gotten the weapon out of his hands, inflict damage on him until he's dead or has stopped moving. Tough, I'll admit, but these are tough times. Commit to your actions. Luckily, few people will find themselves in the midst of an active shooter event. But honestly, I believe that more are coming. Needing a plan for active shooter situations is galling to some, but it's part of the life that you have to lead in the new normal. Those with a plan will have a better chance to survive this event and many other disasters in the uncertain future. This is Joe Alton, MD, that old Dr. Bones, wishing you the best of health in good times or bad. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dr. Bones Nurse Amy. Follow us on Facebook at Doom and Bloom or Survival Medicine Dr. Bones Nurse Amy, and Twitter at Prepper Show. And don't forget our weekly podcast, The Survival Medicine Hour, on blogtalkradio.com. Thanks again.